It's season 7 of Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Red Tulips Consulting. We hit the 300 episode milestone this year, so don't forget to subscribe or follow us. We have a lot more to talk about. We continue our celebration of the arts this month with a longtime listener, first-time guest. It's Cynthia Young, and she's here to talk with us about art therapy and why everyone should do art. This is a really fun conversation. You don't want to miss episode 306. Hey, welcome to Monday, November 10th, 2025. Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's edition of Radio Free 501c. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. I'm the principal and founder of Red Tulips Consulting. I'm so glad you're here with us today as we continue our celebration of the arts with our Thankful for the Arts month here in November. This week, we're joined by another first-time guest, a friend of mine, Cynthia Young, and I'm really excited to have her here. But before we ask Cynthia to introduce herself, I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this big, beautiful world of ours. Hope you're having a great week. And if you have not had a chance to follow or subscribe to our podcast yet, please take a moment and do that because we are having so many great conversations. We are well past episode 300, and we still have a lot to talk about. So please remember to do that. This week's topic is art therapy and why it's important for humans. So before we dive into the topic, Cynthia, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. Would you
Thank
like
you
to
so
say
much.
hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Well, hello, audience, and I'm so glad you're here too because there are 305 episodes before me that are really great. And thank you, Cecilia, for asking me to be on. I was sort of hoping one day I'd get the big ask. So this is my moment. My name is Cynthia Young. I'm a certified association executive and over 10 years the executive director of the American Art Therapy Association. And we represent the mental health profession of art therapy, which is a regulated licensed mental health profession. Art therapists are, um, at minimum, they have to get a master's degree in art therapy, and then they get credentials and licensure. So when you think of an art therapist, you're thinking of any other mental health professional, right? We don't do art therapy at home. We do art therapy with a credentialed licensed art therapist in the room, right? Um, and what they simply do is they are mental health professionals that are using the visual arts in their work. They're working with every possible client group that you might think of, uh, the gamut, really. And you think right now when there's such a need for mental health across every possible community, but my members work with veterans and active military. They work with children. They work with adults with memory care issues. They work with stressed out executive directors like myself and parents, regular anxiety and life and emotional health management, of course, right? But we do see, a significant amount of the art therapists work with the marginalized communities from immigration, LGBTQIA trauma, racial trauma, eating disorders, uh, prison inmates, people dealing with medical illnesses. How do I get through managing my cancer? So, um, you name it, they work with it. They simply use the visual arts in that, and it is a well-researched body of work. So that's who our therapists are. They're amazing. We just came off of our small association staff, just came off of 2 conferences live in person in wonderful, calm, beautiful Portland, Oregon, and a virtual conference as well. And fun fact, Cecilia, I have more than 20% of my members coming to our conferences, which I think is a good data point.
That is amazing. 20%
20%.
come every conference. Wow. Now, why do you think that is?
I've thought about it recently, and I'd like to say very simply, because we do a great job at conferences and events, and you don't want to miss them, and that is true. But as much as our conference is like any other great association has, 200 great continuing education courses and all of that, I think that art therapists really value community, perhaps more than others. Um, and I often say about my members, often behind their back, but now officially on this podcast, that the vast majority of them are these truly golden-hearted human beings who are very smart, very creative, but very smart. Um, and they went into a profession that's hard to get into because you need the master's degree, which right now are mostly at private institutions that we are expanding all the time. So we're seeing a lot more programs come up in public, more affordable institutions. But you need the master's degree. Then you need your thousands of hours of supervised clinical training. And then you need your credentials and your license, like any other mental health professional. But it's expensive to get into. And then you find out that we're making gaps in it, but it's really not always a well understood profession, right? So then, you go to get a job and somebody says, "Oh, gosh, I do art at home." Like, yes, you do art at home, but you don't do your mental health therapy at home, right? So
Right.
they're not a highly paid profession. A lot of academics, a lot of private practitioners working in hospitals, working in community centers, but these are people that work really hard and really long to get into a profession that's not going to pay them well. Thus, the Golden Heart Place, they are trying to save the world. They are making the world a better place. So whether they are working with that veteran who says, and we've met them, who will say, I have not, art therapy kept me from committing suicide, right? Whether they're working with the memory care patient who was able to express in art a family memory that her adult children thought was long gone, right? Whether they're working with somebody who has been unable to leave their house out of fear and anxiety for years and is now able to cope and make progress in that area. Um, they're just trying to make the world better. And many of them even also work in community art therapy where they're going in after a hurricane, after ravaging fires, after other trauma, to support community healing. So they're just amazing human beings, really. And not forget your question, but I'm waxing poetic. So
No.
here's the thing. Why do they come to conferences? They come to conferences for that community. And that's why even our virtual conference, which has been growing because not all our therapists can afford the time away or the cost of coming to a conference. So about 600 people at a virtual conference, which we use a very, very interactive platform called Bespeak, made by the Matrix company. And it's just not like, watching Zoom videos all day. They get to engage with each other a lot. And I really think that that is it. This is a marginalized profession that is looking for community. So when they come to conference, we often hear, I feel like I'm at a family reunion, right? I feel welcome here. I see, especially for members that for one reason of themselves are from marginalized communities. They say we see other art therapists that look and talk like me and feel like me. So that's my 20% come to our conferences, and it's worth every ounce of the 5 staff teams' energy to to
Wow. So
deliver.
you are a 5-person staff.
5 to 7 at any given time, yeah.
Wow. And you have this great conference that people like to come to, which is fantastic. I love hearing that. And I would think with such a niche specialty that they really are going to be craving that connection with each other because people outside of what they do are not going to understand what they do. So I've always been curious about art therapists. Do they have to be an artist before they go to school to become a therapist?
The vast majority of them are artists through undergrad. When they do their mental health, the mental health piece is the master's piece, right? But yes, they have to be able to do the art because an art therapist would not ask a client to engage in an art directive that they can't do themselves, right?
Right.
They wouldn't set an art therapist, an art client up to be frustrated in that way. And to be clear, I think I was clear, but I am not an art therapist, so I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking about them. Do not take any art therapy advice from me. Get yourself a credentialed art therapist if you want art therapy advice. What I see, you know, from anecdotally looking at who comes in to our master's programs, it's either students that are, if they're straight through, right, a young person that's an undergrad, either is an art student who wants to use their art to make the world a better place, or they're a psychology or a mental health behavioral studies student who happens to be love doing art. And it's like, well, how can I incorporate those two? But once they get into the master's program, they're going to be focusing on mental health care. But
So,
before you ask the next question,
okay.
important fun fact, you might ask me, do the clients have to be good at art? And the answer is a definitive no. Every single person, if you're looking for mental health care, you should consider art therapy as a potential option. You do not have to be good about at art. I'm not good at art. It's not about the art. It's about the process of making the art.
So, and I was going to ask you a question, but now you got me on the process of the art. So, do the art therapists pick the art form that's going to work best for the client, or do they try different ones depending on what they're working on? And when I say what they're working on, I mean, let's say maybe you're a high performing executive who's really stressed out or burned out. Like, would they encourage you to do a different form of art, like painting or sculpture, or does it really depend on the individual?
Um, the 3 points on that answer. One, I am not an art therapist, so we need to let them speak for themselves. But materials are, and direction and the specific needs of the client are incredibly important. So it's an individual conversation. However, there are volumes, Cecilia, and they are fascinating. I've popped into some of their continuing education, volumes of how different art materials impact your neurological function and your response and
Mhm.
your brain. So again, not an art therapist, but it's simple, like, elevator talk examples. Crayons are regressive, right? So somebody said to me, well, maybe if you're trying to get somebody to loosen up, maybe I'd use crayons, right? But if you're trying to get somebody to have some structure, maybe you would use something else, right? Um, there are materials that, depending on that very individual's experience, could trigger something bad, can trigger some trauma. We have countless examples. Some of them I don't think are I'm comfortable sharing, but as a topic for another day. But yeah, materials and supplies matter, direction. It's an individual relationship with a therapist.
So I wonder, and I know you're not an art therapist. We're going to clarify that one more time. She is an excellent association management expert, but she does not actually do the art therapy. But
Well, do
you
you know
work,
why we say that so much? Because one of the work of my association is to make sure there's an accurate understanding about who our therapists are, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
we love art teachers, but they're not art therapists. And so certainly an association CEO is not.
Right. Well, no, and I get that. I mean, I used to work at a specialty bar association, but that doesn't make me a lawyer. So, you
Right,
know,
exactly right. It's just when
yeah,
you have a less understandable field, a less well-known field, that's a great example, right?
yeah,
The the you don't go to somebody who just likes the law.
right. It's like, sure, I
You go to
like
a
the
lawyer.
law, but no, I just play a lawyer on TV, as the
Right.
saying goes. I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. So, but one, and I'm just curious, it's just a personal curiosity thing. I know you talk with your members a lot about how they help their clients, the different approaches they might take. And I'm wondering, is photography an art form that they might use in therapy?
Every visual art might be employed in art therapy. Now, we have cousins. The American Art Therapy Association represents visual artists, which use every type of material. I have seen some amazing workshops using fibers, right? Fibers, collaging is art therapy. It can be used in art therapy, right? It's simply not markers and pens, right? Quilt making, clay, um, paper mache, everything, really, everything. However, our cousins, separate and distinct associations, represent other creative arts therapies. So we're under the umbrella of creative arts therapies, which is dance, which you had somebody representing just last week. Music therapists, so a whole lot of music therapists. They have a phenomenal association as well. As does the Dance and Movement Therapy Association, poetry, um, I'm at a
So
loss.
everything. And the great thing about poetry is there's so many different forms of it. So you
That is
can,
true. And what your listeners can do is check out the National Coalition of Creative Arts Therapies. This is NCATA, we call them, NCCATA,
Okay.
NCCATA. I can give you a link later if you would like,
Sure, I'd love that.
which you could learn all about the different ways. Pretty much any art is good for you at its heart and core. You know.
So why is art good for us, Cynthia?
Well, art is good for us because, and you're going to have the fabulous Jay Dick from Americans for the Arts next week, so he can load you with amazing fun facts, right? But art is good for us the way exercise is good for us. We should be getting physical exercise and we should be getting art into our daily regime. And, I try to do that, but I don't do a great job of it. But art helps emotional regulation. It helps us manage anxiety. It helps us manage stress. It helps us manage balance and improve even executive function, right? Focus and calm. Um, Art therapy addresses all of those normal things, right? Anxiety and stress, but art in general, whether you are seeing an art therapist for mental health care or you are just doing art for every day, you're going to see support for anxiety, support for stress, support for helping to communicate in ways that maybe you can't communicate as comfortably, right? Working something out. Creativity is improved by doing art. Problem solving is improved by doing art. Americans for the Arts is going to tell you, but I love the fun fact that when children do art, our math and science scores go up. So if there's a V8 moment for parents out there, do not dismiss the value of art. Let them be messy, let them be creative. Um, what is the Cecilia, you probably know this number, but something like 20 or 25% of science and math Nobel Prize winners or are hobbyist artists, right? They play instruments, they do the art. So art is essentially good for you. So while the American Art Therapy Association absolutely wants you to get your art-based mental health care from a credentialed art therapist, we also encourage every human being to engage in art for wellness.
Yeah. Yes, and
Mm.
I agree with that
Yeah,
wholeheartedly because I think most of us like to sing in the shower and it makes us
that's
feel good
art.
because we're
Yeah.
just like, just letting loose. We all like to move, we all like to dance. I like to write. I used to play an instrument when I was young. I played the piano and the mandolin, and I loved that. And I love movies. Movies an art form. Uh, Going to museums. I love going to museums and looking at art. So, do you know, Cynthia, is there any information from your members, like just talking with them about their work? Like, does going to a museum help us and enjoying other
100%.
people's art?
100%. In fact, I personally have been encouraged to take days off. I have ridiculous amount of unused vacation time. And one of my members said, Cynthia, just, layman's advice here, but why don't you just take a day off and get lost in a museum?
Mhm.
It was so wonderful. I left thinking I'm going to do this every Friday from now on. Never happened again. But
I know you sound like me, overly
seven
ambitious.
staff. But but what I did, I enjoyed being alone and in the quiet of the museum, but I learned something new, right? So when we, National Geo had an article last year about this, right? There's a lot of research that when we open our brain and try to learn something new that is not what we would normally be interested in, right? So for me, it might be, I don't know, reading about earthworms or something, that you're actually building new pathways in your brain, right? You're keeping your brain healthy by learning something new, which is why I subscribe to National Geographic, because, right, you read these articles and like, wow, who knew, right?
Yeah.
And more art therapists are working in museums now as well. That is in a increasing area. So, one thing that what we're seeing is, look, art therapists are on one part of the spectrum of what's called arts and health, right? We're on the spectrum that is science-based, researched, evidence-based, clinical mental health care. However, art working in the community and working side by side, so whether it's somebody working in the hospital to, play the violin or do some art or working in community art, um, we see statistics of senior citizens living not only longer but independently because they're engaging in art. Art heals loneliness, right? Art brings the community together. You could sign up tomorrow for, um, a drawing class or a collage class, something really simple, or you could do something that I think may have not have been the wisest thing, but I love it. I was advised to sign up for for a clay class 2 years ago. An art therapist said to me, maybe I'm by the way, an adult ADHD adult, and they're like, you need to work with your hands, right? When you're working with your hands, your brain, you get out of your head, right? And
Mhm.
by the way, I think a lot of association executives have ADHD because we have to think about 25 different things at the same
Right.
time, right? So
Yeah. We're distracted a lot.
I'm not sure how many of my colleagues can honestly say they turn off their brain at night, regardless of where they fall on the neurodivergent spectrum. But working with clay or other things that are tactile, right? You get messy, fun. And I have to tell you how many days it's hard. And how many days so I've driven up to clay class once a week. And I think I cannot spend 2 hours here. I cannot spend 2 hours here. I've got to deal with this crisis. I've got to deal with that thing that has to be fixed immediately or whatever. And then I walk in there, and the minute my hands are busy in that art, and I'm terrible at it, by the way. So again, not about being good at, but participating in process. I forget about everything, everything. And I'm having fun. I'm talking to people and engaging in a community conversation as well, right? But um, clay has helped with, dare I say it, frustration tolerance because you
Mhm.
fail more than you more than you succeed, right? It teaches patience. It teaches creative ways of being because it doesn't always turn out exactly like it did on Ghost at all, right? And
Oh yeah, well that was a whole other level.
that's a joke. That's a classic joke. Like, don't even think, right? And there's so many different ways that you could still make something really attractive and pretty to you, right?
Mhm.
Without it being perfect. Anyway, I walk out, my head is clear, I'm more focused. I'm like, I can't believe I was worried about XYZ. It's not a crisis, it's another day in association land. I can now approach it more carefully. Um,
Yeah, you
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 know,
just made me think, Cynthia. You remember that old kids game Candyland?
who didn't love Candyland?
Yeah, who didn't love it? And you just said Association Land. That's a new board game right there. And I think that would
I would
be
be
an
happy to
artistic.
collaborate with you on a
Yeah,
project.
we should do that. Well, I did create a game. I kind of dabble in a lot of different things. I created a game years ago called the Work at Home game because I was a CSC at a virtual organization and my staff was working like way too much.
Yeah.
And I know that's like, most bosses or leaders would be like, "Oh, I like it that you're working so much," but I didn't because I knew
Oh,
they were going to get out of balance, and I also didn't believe they were being paid enough to put in that many hours, to be honest. So I made up the work at home game, and you basically compete against yourself because you give yourself points for brushing your teeth, putting on real clothes, actually taking a lunch break, and you lose points if you like check email on vacation. So
oh my God,
those,
I would really fail at that game, but I am grateful I was pushed out of my comfort zone to go to a class that locks me up for 2 hours with something that totally
yeah.
grasped me. By the way, speaking of working at home, my team is all virtual. And we certainly do not have any mandatory art making or whatever, but my team and I are very passionate about what our members do. And we love them. And we have a lot of all member meetings. We have 6 all member meetings a year because we're super transparent. We want the members talking to the board and each other. And we also have a lot of shared interest group evenings. And back to why our members like to come to conference, they've been asking, especially this year, it's been a hard year, and they've been asking for more community. So we have a growing amount of shared interest groups. And what we've asked them to start, the volunteers that lead these, is let's just have an art and chat night, right? Because whenever our members are together, they want to do art. By the way, our in-person conference has a huge open art studio. You just drop in any time of the day. You could learn a new technique or just do art together. Um, and so we have these art and chat nights where the shared interest group or the topic may be very uncomfortable or unpleasant because they're working out something that they're dealing with clients or you know, uh, folks that are working with super marginalized groups they carry a lot, right?
Mhm.
But then they have an art directive and they do some art, and if those are willing, share it out and explain what they're trying to express, managing their frustrations or their joy or whatever, and everybody feels better at the end. So we've done that with my staff. We've had a board member volunteer to come talk to the staff about everyday anxiety management. We recently learned about vicarious trauma, which in my non-therapist simple way, the definition essentially is when the news headlines may not directly affect me, but I'm overwhelmed by them,
Yeah.
right? Somebody else is on the call saying, this is happening in my neighborhood and it's directly impacting me. And it's so overwhelming. And then you have to get back to the conversation in your staff of like, let's get people to register for conference.
Yeah.
Um, so we had a board member come talk to us about that, just to point out a couple of things like, when you're feeling a lot of feelings, you may not even realize how they come out. They may come out in you being a little short-tempered with a
Right.
colleague, or, you may obsess over an email, or you may take something too personally, whatever. But at the end, they gave us some basic art wellness techniques we could do at our desk that were so simple. Um, and if anyone wants to talk to me, they could call me and I'll give you all simple techniques. But in 5 minutes with no mandatory thing, it was like pick up a piece of paper, pick up a marker, here's what you're going to do. And I'm like, this is going to be so silly. 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, 3 minutes, I want you to do this. And then we report it out for 5 minutes if we wanted to talk about it. But I'm like, oh my God, I felt better. I did something for 3 minutes
Hmm.
with a marker and a piece of paper that, believe me, was not pretty in any way. And I felt so much better. And so anyway, everyone should be engaging in art. To that end, the American Art Therapy Association, we have a new program, which is a bit of a hybrid, and that is called Art It Out. It is an art for wellness program. And we launched this actually 24 at Cecilia, one of your favorite conferences and mine, the ASAE MMCC
Yeah.
conference. Mighty Citizen brought us in to host an Art It Out room where people just, you're busy and you're stressed at a conference or you're tired, whatever, just pop in, do some art with us. And it's part of a program we're developing for essentially employee wellness association membership conferences, where there's a lot of people either in one place or an employee wellness program where we're, on a month-to-month basis looking to help employees support each other and just getting folks to find easy, simple ways that anyone can engage in art. And in the pop-up studio at this conference, we had real art therapists there. So while they didn't engage in direct therapy with anyone, it was important because sometimes what happens is you come in and you're doing your art and they see that we're the Art Therapy Association. So they start saying, like, you have no idea how stressed I am, right?
Hmm. Right.
And sometimes some things start to happen while they're doing that art and they're talking, and then they want to talk to somebody in the corner. Somebody came in and said, I just had a very big personal loss.
Mhm.
And wow, I would like to learn more about this. So we do that. But what I thought was super interesting, one, the room gets crowded. There's, 50 people at any given time at about 6 tables doing, you know, there's 2 or 3 easy directives out, either, pick up markers and do your own thing, or, we made some garland, or we created some networking and supporting your colleagues, kind of fun little things to hand out with cookies in them. Um, but the conversations became, Celia, I'm not kidding you, almost a contest of whose association, what professions we represent as association executives that are the most stressed, right?
Oh,
The
wow.
conversations were, I'm like, I had no idea that architects have the kind of anxiety they have. I mean, I knew the first responder associations I expected, right? But from architects to electrical engineers to groups you wouldn't necessarily think automatically, well, why would they, have a population that's particularly stressed, or high suicide rates, or this, that, or the other. And there's just such a need out there. And look, not everybody's going to have time, money, or access to mental health care, whether it be talk therapy, music therapy or art therapy. And for those people who need mental health care or behavioral health care, which is all of us at one time or another,
Mm-hmm.
um, we want to make sure there's access for them. But we also do think, just like you do exercise every day, right? For physical hygiene, mental health hygiene is important, and the arts can support. It could just, some basic care. We also
That's
did a conference recently where we did an art room for a conference for a new nonprofit. Cecilia, you've got to talk to them. New C3 called Eradicating Hate.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and Eradicating Hate has had
Love
a
that.
summit in for several years. They were born out of the synagogue shootings in Pittsburgh, but now are turning into a national association out of that. But it was several groups have worked in that Pittsburgh crisis, and they focus on, well, eradicating hate, the systemic uh, reasons and the problems for that. Anyway, they had their conference in Pittsburgh. They asked us to come in and do an art room because they said we have two types of folks that are coming. We have first responders, right, from mental health to police, fire, lawyers, but we also have victims and victims' families, right? And the content is extremely heavy. So,
Great.
so we provided, with the help of our Seton Hill Master's Program in Art Therapy, a Art It Out studio, and we respect everyone's privacy and also have a lot of pictures from that, but it was really, really well received.
That's great. Well, I will see if I can reach out to somebody at Eradicating Hate. I would.
Connecting you.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be wonderful. But before we wrap up for this week, Cynthia, you mentioned your Art It Out program. Now, is the Art It Out program the same as your Art for Wellness clinic?
It is. It
It
is.
is? Okay.
Could I be perfectly transparent? It's piloting, and we're toying around with what the best name is.
Hmm.
So if anybody has suggestions, we're happy to hear it before we go to trademark. And Cecilia, Rogue Tulips is so perfect. I bet you would be the winner of the contest for naming things. If,
Oh, I don't know. Well, thank you, first of all. I know some other people have mentioned my company name has inspired them to rebrand and have some fun with their name.
one of the best.
Uh, there because my company name's based on a true story because we had actual rogue tulips growing in the front lawn and not in the flower box where
Oh,
they were
okay.
supposed to be. So the first spring we lived here in the south garden bed, there's these wonderful, beautiful yellow tulips. And I was like, oh, that's a nice surprise in an old house. And the next year I'm looking out the window on the north side of the house and I say to my husband, look at the lawn. We have rogue tulips growing in the lawn. And he said, that'd be a great name for a band. And I said, or a company. And I wrote it on a index card and stuck it on my bulletin board. And I said, if I ever start another company, I'm going to call it that.
I
And
love
that,
those Rogue Tulips. I'm pro Rogue Tulips.
yeah, it's like,
Quote,
we don't think the same.
it's like
Everybody else.
the Wildflowers song by, I'm going to go on a wild tangent. Dolly Parton, who
Mhm.
hopefully everyone loves because you should. Wildflowers don't care where they grow. There's a song
That's
called
right.
Wildflowers, and it's about the resilience, right?
That's
The
right.
tulips
And
are resilient. Those Rogue Tulips are very resilient.
they're very resilient. And they were coming back about every 2 years because tulips grow from bulbs. So I have no idea how they got over there because I didn't plant them. Nobody knew anything about it. But yeah, there they were. And I actually have some photos of the actual rogue tulips that inspired the name. But I have to say, getting back to the name for your wellness clinic, I like Art It Out
Thank you.
because in therapy, we talk it out or
Right.
we work, if we're doing physical activity, like you and I like to work out,
Run it out.
uh,
Yep.
work it out, run it out, get on that treadmill for 45 minutes or whatever, or hit the yoga mat. I did yoga every day for about 10 or 12 years a while
Wow.
back. And, if I found myself stressed out, I would just roll out my yoga mat, hit the mat. I'd solve a lot of problems on the mat too, because your mind is not distracted. It's not going in
Yeah.
8,000 different directions. And there's so many different ways to express yourself, which is what I love about art. You can draw,
That's
you can paint.
right. The
Yeah.
body and mind need art just as it needs exercise.
Yes. And
Yes, good.
it's one of the things you mentioned about having that art studio available. I think that sort of thing is just perfect for a big conference because a conference can be overwhelming to some people, as you know, because there's generally we're grouped into like introvert, extrovert, ambivert. I'm an ambivert. So sometimes I'm like, you know what, I just want to like go be quiet.
Yeah.
And so having a space like that where you can just go do something like that, or like if you're at a workshop or a conference or a facilitation and the leader of the facilitation leaves things like, oh, I don't know, little Play-Dohs. You mentioned Play-Doh when we were getting
Love
ready for
Play-Doh.
the episode, or what do you call it? The straws that you can make things out of. Pipe
Pipe,
cleaners, like the
pipe
pipe
cleaners. They've been
cleaners.
renamed to something else, but for heaven,
Yeah.
I do not know what the name is, but yes.
Yeah, I don't know what they call them now, but you know, just creating things like that, being able to do that, it's really expressive
Hands,
and
brain,
yeah. And
mind.
it helps us relax. I think it helps us think better. You know, we get lost in it in the work.
Our biggest challenge at an art at out workshop at conferences is getting people to leave the room,
Oh,
right? So, but you're right. The introvert may be there quietly working by themselves. The extrovert um, is making new friends, right? And sharing. And a lot of times there's people who've never been to the conference before who are looking for connection, and that's a really easy way.
yeah.
Because that the two people you were messing around with eating a little bit of chocolate and making pipe cleaner dolls or whatever an hour later, but they were all talking about their work at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So
So I would be a major offender if you ever brought that to an ASAE conference again and I was
I
attending.
am
It
I
would be,
am welcome all potential sponsors. We would love to be at ASA annual.
yeah. So let's put that out there. So folks, Rogue Tulips is not big enough to support a huge thing like this, but we'd love to hear other people come together and let's get an arted out center at the next ASAE meeting. I think that'd be wonderful. So Cynthia, this has been a great conversation. I know you'll be back because we have so much more to talk about. But I always like to ask my guests, what's the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And how can they get in touch with you so they can learn more about your art wellness clinic?
Well, the one thing is two things. The one thing is two things, which is one, you could reach us at www.arttherapy.org to learn about finding a mental health professional art therapist near you or becoming an art therapist. That is, by the way, the most trafficked part of our website. It is such a growing field, is how do I
Really?
become an art therapist? So find us there. Email me at membership or info@arttherapy.org at any time you want. And if you would like to talk about bringing an art for wellness clinic either to your employees remotely or in person, let's art it out together. And you can find me at info@arttherapy.org would be the easiest way.
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
And
and
I
the
love
second thing
this.
is do art. Art is good for you. 5 minutes a day.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I write, I like to sketch and draw a little bit. I garden. I have my indoor garden and my outdoor
It's
garden.
art.
Very do a lot of that. And again, just get up and take a walk for 5 minutes. You know, you don't have to be like me and Cynthia and be gym rats, but just get up and take a walk.
That is true. And if you are walking with your artist's mind, you can always, collect a couple of twigs and leaves or something and do some art with it later. So, or just
That's
admire
true.
nature.
Yeah, there's so much inspiration around us. And yes, the world can be overwhelming, but
Yes.
there's a lot of beauty still in the world. And we can express that for ourselves. So, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining me this week. I'm so glad. I know you're a longtime listener, first time guest. So glad to
Yes,
have you
ma'am.
here. So, look forward to having you back.
I'm looking forward to being back and seeing you at the Art It Out Clinic at ASA Annual with tulips.
Yes, I actually I use a Zoom background, so if people are watching, they can't really see them. But I went to one of those paint studios with a friends a couple years ago, and I painted little tulips. I made a tulip bouquet out of their wooden tulips I painted in our logo colors. So I'll have to show them to you.
Love to see it.
But yeah, things like that. I love doing that. So, well, we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So, one more reminder, please follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast service. We're easy to find, or you can always find our episodes on our website on the podcast page. The website's roguetulips.com. All the pages are very easy to navigate. We have a podcast page. You can find this episode featuring Cynthia and share it with your friends and colleagues, and see our library of podcast episodes and see what else we've been talking about. You can go to our blog page and see what's on my mind this week, because you never know what I'm going to say. I don't know what I'm going to say most of the time. So it's always interesting. If you're interested in getting some education, especially getting that ethics credit that you might need for, say, e-renewal, we are offering our ethics course 2 more times this year in 2025, and then we're going to revamp our content again for next year. But check out our education page and get information about that and our other courses that are coming up. So, and also, if you're interested in working with Rogue Tulips, check out our services page and let's have a conversation. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will, on behalf of Cynthia and myself, we will see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.